This video is about the interpretation of Random Acts of Medicine by Jena and Worsham, responding to some questions from our friends. Here are our answers for your reference. Question 1. It seems these correlations are reflected in statistics, but have these causal relationships been demonstrated? Or are we just judging seemingly reasonable causal relationships based on our own logical understanding? Response. First of all, strictly speaking, from a purely logical perspective, there is no such thing as a causal relationship in the world. You can never be 100% certain that one thing causes another. We discussed this when reading Judea Pearl's The Book of Why. The New Science of Cause and Effect. A simple argument is that from a logical standpoint, you can always assume everything is God's arrangement. Every time I flip the switch, the light comes on. Can I say there is a causal relationship between the switch and the light coming on? No. Maybe God likes to play with me, and he decides whether the light comes on each time I press the switch. So, causality can only be a subjective judgment of the observer. When we say, a cause is B, and find such a causality, it's not to compete with others but to be useful. If you believe that air pollution worsens people's health, you should find ways to reduce air pollution. That's all. Therefore, what we fear is not logically proving that your causality is not rigorous, but finding a false causal relationship. Some cynical people, upon hearing about statistical research, only memorize the phrase, correlation does not imply causation, and say, I don't believe your conclusion. This attitude is not constructive. All research can only provide us with inspirational guidance. Otherwise, what else can you do? Do nothing? So, for applied sciences like medicine, we can assume that there are strong causal relationships in the world. Randomized experiments are a rigorous method for determining causality. These two groups of people are randomly selected, and as long as the sample size is large enough, we can assume that the two groups are identical. Now, we apply an action to Group A and do nothing to Group B. If Group A shows a reaction that Group B does not, then we can say that the action caused that reaction. This is causality. And everything the researchers do is to ensure that 1. Groups A and B were originally similar enough, meaning Group A is not, for example, all rich people, and Group B is not all poor people, as the differences later on might be due to their original differences. 2. After taking action, the different reactions of the two groups are not accidental. Both of these ensures require a sufficiently large statistical sample. How big is big enough? There is no objective standard here. We can only say that statistically there is a subjective criterion, which is p less than 0.05, meaning significant enough. So, all of this is full of subjectivity. The current industry agreement in academia is that randomized experiments, including the natural experiments mentioned in this book, can provide causality, as long as the data meet the requirements of statistical significance. This is just an agreement. It's not a physical law, but only this way can scientific research provide guidance for human life. Question 2. Does giving doctors red envelopes, excluding moral factors, affect the success rate of their surgeries? Furthermore, does the success rate differ for doctors who accepted or declined the red envelopes, excluding moral factors? I wonder if there are any statistical studies on this, and if not, can we speculate on it? Response. This is a very interesting question. I haven't come across such studies. After all, it's challenging to scientifically measure situations where doctors receive red envelopes. However, based on some discussions I've seen, I can confidently say that if you were to analyze the correlation between receiving red envelopes and surgical outcomes, you'd likely find a higher success rate for surgeries where red envelopes were received. But it's not because receiving red envelopes improves a doctor's motivation to perform surgeries well. Instead, it's often an unwritten rule that doctors accept red envelopes when they feel confident about the surgery, and they may decline if they lack certainty. Also, it's worth noting that red envelopes are usually accepted from wealthier individuals, introducing textbook confounding factors. In reality, giving red envelopes is unlikely to enhance a doctor's surgical skills. Once in the operating room, a doctor automatically gives their best effort. They won't say, "You didn't give me a red envelope, so I'll stitch you up with fewer stitches." This isn't a matter of professional ethics. It's an instinctive response, a desire to perform the surgery well. As long as there's a certain level of professional competence, doctors won't be contemplating red envelopes in the operating room. I understand that the primary function of red envelopes is to make the doctor's attitude more favorable when talking to you. Without a red envelope, there might be information they're less inclined to share with you. With a red envelope, they might engage in a more extended conversation. Interestingly, these extra conversations sometimes prove significantly beneficial for the treatment. I'm curious whether giving red envelopes can influence doctors to prescribe fewer expensive yet unnecessary medications, but I haven't found information on that. Considering that medication decisions often occur before red envelopes are given, I suspect the impact might be minimal. Question 3. The Hawthorne effect suggests that people's work efficiency improves when their work is being observed. A psychological phenomenon. However, some individuals become nervous when observed, leading to decreased efficiency or mistakes. Others resist being observed, creating psychological effects. Do these psychological impacts affect statistics? Response. These possibilities exist, and there is some experimental evidence. The Hawthorne effect seems straightforward. When someone observes, does work efficiency increase? The results seem intuitive, but the research conclusions are quite ambiguous. In 2014, a paper conducted a meta-analysis of 19 experiments on the Hawthorne effect, covering various scenarios. From doctors in hospitals and communities, students in schools, patients following medical advice, to academic reviewers diligently assessing papers. The results were inconclusive. Some studies reported no conclusions, while others indicated a minor effect. The research in Random Acts of Medicine that treated doctors being observed as a natural experiment stands out in this group due to its large sample size and clear conclusions. For relatively simple tasks, especially when the novelty of being observed is fresh for employees, the Hawthorne effect tends to have the best results in the short term. However, over an extended observation period, some studies found that after 10 to 15 observations, healthcare professionals reverted to their usual level of diligence. Similarly, teachers' behavior returned to normal after only one day of surveillance cameras in classrooms. Interestingly, at least one study discovered a reverse Hawthorne effect. In 2008, Harvard anthropologists observed 14 employees responsible for assembling telephone exchange equipment and found that work efficiency not only didn't increase but actually decreased when being observed. The reason was workers suspected that increased productivity might lead to cost-cutting measures or even job layoffs, so they intentionally reduced efficiency. Another consideration is the existence of small groups among workers with their own codes of conduct and methods of execution, unaffected by supervisors. As for whether the Hawthorne effect applies to complex mental work, it's currently unknown. It's possible that observers are seen as disturbances, but they could also help focus attention and reduce procrastination. Tim Ferriss, for instance, deliberately hired people to watch him work to avoid distractions. In conclusion, the Hawthorne effect exists in certain scenarios. Still, it's challenging to pinpoint which situations and for how long it persists. Humans aren't machines, they adapt to various external changes. As the saying goes, I anticipated your anticipation. The health check I experienced in elementary school wasn't entirely the Hawthorne effect. The check had strict criteria, and if you didn't meet them, you didn't pass. The Hawthorne effect is solely having someone observe without any hard requirements or rewards. It's a psychological effect, not an economic one. Regardless, even if the Hawthorne effect is effective, it's a subtle influence and not the ultimate solution to improving work efficiency.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.